is the feel-good movie of the year.
I'm a musician about to embark on a concert tour.
I got no problem being on the road with you, but I ain't no butler.
Critics rave. Academy Award nominee Viggo Mortensen and Academy Award winner Mahershala Ali are brilliant in a rare gem of a film that is wildly crowd-pleasing.
This is the best fried chicken I ever had. Come on, take it, eat it.
Do you have plates or utensils?
Eat it with your hands. I got dry.
Green Book, inspired by a true friendship. In theaters November 21st.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers.
Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figure it out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Requires new line. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 480p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. I am hosting a roundtable on nonviolent communication. We have with us 2 leaders in the field here in New York City, Thom and Rick Ulfik. Rick has been on the show a number of times, having to do with We the World and some very wonderful initiatives that he is in charge of here in New York and actually reaching worldwide. But today's subject is really looking at the nature of communication and how, why don't I put it this way, violence can tend to slip in to our patterns of speaking, to sometimes intonation, sometimes grammar and syntax, in ways that we are not actually so aware of. So thanks to Marshall Rosenberg, who came up with this idea and this phrase of nonviolent communication, there's an entire series, a whole understanding of how we can speak responsibly, accountably, and get our message across, sometimes messages that are not so pleasant, actually, to make, to communicate, yet need to be, but it can be done in a way that is not evoking upset, anger, violence on the other side of the communication, or at least we are being responsible in the way we speak. Well, we'll be unpacking this with both of our guests today in the roundtable, Thom and Rick Ulfik. A little bit about Thom. He brings 27 years of human potential study and training to his work as a writer, speaker, and workshop leader. His passion and knowledge of nonviolent communication, commonly known also as NVC, we love acronyms, of course, combined to create a practical, understandable, humorous, and potentially profound approach for learning and integrating skills that help us experience more compassion and more understanding. He is described as concise, inspiring, sincere, optimistic, applying transformational and spiritual perspectives to real-life situations. Many of his students become active facilitators, trainers, and practitioners. And Rick Ulfik is the founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net, of course. We the World is a global coalition building organization that annually connects and promotes thousands of socially conscious organizations and businesses to generate public awareness and action for peace, justice, sustainability, and transformation. So both of these gentlemen have been involved with the study and the practice application of nonviolent communication, and we're all going to learn a lot about it in today's show. So hold on, and we're going to all learn how to speak better, God willing, by the end of today's show. So, Thom, welcome to A Better World, and Rick, so good to have you both.
Hello.
Hello. It's
pleasure.
great to be on the show again with you, Mitchell.
Good. Excellent, Rick. Great to have you again. Thom, and welcome for the first time. You and I haven't spoken in a while, and it's a pleasure. You were very kind to set me up many years ago to interview Marshall Rosenberg for A Better World TV, and here we are some time after, and I'm able to have the two of you on, so I'm very glad to have you. Thom, you who have been in this and you who have studied with Marshall for so many years and really have represented his work in the New York area for so long, could you just give us a definition first of nonviolent communication, and what do you think our audience should know about it to begin with?
Sure. It's a way of thinking, actually. Here comes the surprise. I'll put it right out there. I mean, in order to communicate in a certain way, it would require us to think a certain way. And so
yes.
What Marshall did was he figured out that if we focus on certain ideas or certain areas, and even we use words for that, whether we use the word needs or feelings or observation, and we do this in order to focus our attention on certain things, which is basically human needs. In other words, what NVC does, it allows us to see each other, no matter who we are, no matter what we've done. It allows us to see each other really as equals, as human beings just trying to get through it here. And it does that by really paying attention to what it is we say. And in order to pay attention to what we say, we have to pay attention to what we think, right? And so that's kind of how it works. And the idea behind that is that it's a replacement for how we communicate now, or certainly an adaptation of some new practices, and which is that it helps us stay away from moralistic judgments and things that really disconnect us instantaneously. And so it allows us, as you were saying earlier, to be able to have difficult conversations without making anybody wrong, and so that we can stay in connection and even be talking about tough stuff.
Yes. So there are certain distinctions. Of course, whenever we speak, it is a reflection of how we think, whether it's conscious thinking or unconscious thinking, or kind of shadow thinking, if you will, where, perhaps more base parts of us are ruling, sort of like the idea of primary process, or, reptilian conversation, where people are just very free, almost like children who can just kind of blurt out anything, anywhere, anytime, regardless of the consequences, right? So it's my understanding, and the little that I have studied, and I have studied some, thanks to you and Marshall and his book, that we're becoming responsible for how we speak and the way we even structure sentences, so that we're very tuned in to the receiver of a communication. Could you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Well, one of the most basic parts of this work is that we want to consider everybody's needs. And so in order to do that, we can ask ourselves certain questions, right? And another thing, and see if we can tune into what is it that we want in a situation, and what is it that other people want in a situation. And then be able to talk about what's existing, which maybe we don't like so much, but be able to talk about it in a way that doesn't blame anybody. So, for example, we call that observation, right? It's the art of observation. I could come into my son's bedroom and say, this place is a mess. Or I could come in and say, wow, I can't see the floor, and I'm getting a little nervous here. Could we talk about this?
Yes. Or what an artful arrangement you have of all of your underwear on the floor.
Yes, exactly. And the other important part about this work is that it really, speaking of being responsible, it asks me, like, why is it that I don't want my son to put his clothes on the floor? Maybe I should be putting my clothes on the floor. Hold on a minute here. So really, like, why do I want that? And so this work had me not saying, well, you're supposed to do it. It had me wondering, why is it that we do things? And what are our needs? And so when I could think that way, what needs do I meet when I don't put my clothes on the floor? And then I could talk to my son about that. Not that you're doing something wrong, but, hey, I got an inside tip for you here. If you want to know where your clothes are, it really helps to put them in the same place. And if you don't, if you want to do less work, also it helps to put them like in a hamper instead of having to move them twice. That's why I do it. And it was wonderful. Here we have a connection. And it could have been an argument, or I could have forced him to do it. And it was none of that. Really nice.
So, in other words, if I could interpret what I'm hearing, you will frame your sentences, your communication, in a way that is using first person frequently. It's not blaming, it's not pointing the finger, it's not punitive, it's not critical, it's not moralistic, it's not judgmental.
Exactly.
Okay. And therefore it's nonviolent, by the way. It's nonviolent.
Well, it's also real. I mean, I don't want to be nice, right? I don't want to, because nice, if you're being nice, nice people scare me. I want real people around me. So how do we be real? And how do we do it without making people wrong? Does being real mean we have to be obnoxious? It doesn't. And that's what Marshall did. He gave us a way to really express ourselves meaningfully without making people wrong. Right.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Thom. I really appreciate that. Rick, you have been a student and a practitioner of NVC also for some years now. What is it that first attracted you to it, and what have you been doing with it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was so excited when I first heard about NVC, and one of our board members, we the World's board members, named Ina Bransom. You remember that name, Thom?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So Ina was the one who first said to all of us on We the World's board, Marshall is coming to New York City for the first time in 20 years. It would be fabulous if you attend his workshops because it's a unique, important experience. That's what something like that. Mm-hmm. So I made sure that I went to all of his workshops when he was in New York. I think it was about 4 or 5 of them. And it was just incredible. And, of course, I met Thom, and we did so many things together over the years. The rest is history. And Mitchell, I wanted to kind of bring up another aspect because what Thom was talking about is a very personal interactions and the consciousness of NVC, which is really crucial to having that kind of non-judgmental connection between people. And what I want to also bring in is this kind of like zooming out and looking at things in a societal sense. And this is where it kind of connects with the work of We the World and the We campaign. So, it makes me feel really happy and glad, when I hear people pushing back about the culture wars. We hear all of this happening in the media, right? About polarization that's happening in the United States and around the world. Mm-hmm. So I do hear people, many people, explicitly saying that they believe that we all have much more in common than what divides us. And so that really gives me hope and makes me feel like I said, glad and happy. And I believe that nonviolent communication actually shows this in exquisite detail, what we have in common. And Thom started
What do you
talking
mean by
about,
that?
Yeah, Thom started talking about the needs. So I believe that not only do all people have the same physical needs, and it's not just I believe, this is part of the idea, the framework of nonviolent communication, that all people have not only the same physical needs like air, water, food, shelter, that kind of thing, but we also share what you could call psychological needs like love, respect, meaning,
emotional,
dignity, right, and security. And it's so interesting because NVC
touching.
actually, right, well, connection.
Yeah. But no, actually,
exactly.
I mean touching. I mean touching as in touching infants. It helps to develop their intelligence, literally, and hugging.
That's right.
It keeps the rest of us alive.
Exactly.
Truly.
It's an actual physical need, and if it's
Yes,
deprived when you're a child, there can be consequences. So
right.
So for me, this is really incredible because NVC actually makes a list of all of these needs.
It sounds like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well. That there's some commonality here.
Yeah, there is. It's not really the same idea, but there is some overlap.
They don't.
So there are about 90 or 100 of these. If you look at the list of needs, there's about 90 or 100 of them. And for me, it is a powerful statement of universal values that connect us all in a deeper and more fundamental way than you might think, given how often in the media, as I was saying, we hear people being characterized
divided
in certain ways, labeled
yes.
as being so completely different. We hear things like, we have red state culture versus blue state culture, and we have the 99% versus the 1%, men
sure.
versus women, people of
minorities, etc.,
yes.
color, gender. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And you're putting it well. It's a marketing tool, and it's exactly. It's a whole languaging that gets us into deeper water than into shallower, if you will. Thom, thank you, Rick. That's very helpful to put our attention to the needs portion of the NVC, paradigm. Thom, what were you going to chime in there about the distinction or so between Maslow, which is so well known, and Marshall's?
Well, they don't really conflict. The only thing that I would say is that Maslow didn't perhaps recognize the needs in the same way. He didn't give perhaps equal value. And I mean, it is true that if we are worried about our safety, it's very difficult for us. And in fact, that is something that's very clear in the work of Maslow and Marshall Rosenberg. And that is, if we are worried for our lives, we actually don't care too much about other people's lives. And so I think that's why what Rick was just saying is so important, because the more we feel disconnected and scared, the less we are likely to reconnect. So we have to kind of break that cycle. And what Rick was talking about is, I love what he said. I mean, we've all been taught that needs are like things we need, like you need a house or you need this. It's really not that. The way Marshall looks at it, and the way I like to think about it, is that needs are, well, what I love to ask this question. What do we call somebody without needs?
Needless, feckless, not alive.
I call them dead.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's kind of close to not alive. Yeah.
You're not alive, actually.
Right.
And, in fact, there's a direct correlation. So we can even say, or we can even think about it this way, that we can think that needs, and particularly these things that are on this list, are the impulses of life. And that's what makes them so incredibly universal. All of us humans are experiencing this set of about 100 or more of these impulses of life that every one of us knows intimately, and we all know that each other has that same experience intimately. It's just, how do we tap into it? And that's what Marshall figured out. Really cool.
Yeah. I'm thinking as I'm listening to you both about this, and I do wholly agree. I don't know if I ever got through the whole 100 because I began to feel very needy, and I was concerned. But talking about cultural contexts and the larger society, sociological environment in which we live, let's just say for a moment in the United States, there's this idea, needless to say, a morphogenetic field, I like to think about it as, into which we were all born of this idea of rugged individualism. And there is a kind of a masculine association with that. Well, I don't need this and I don't need that and I can do everything myself. And, of course it's all a bunch of hogwash, but it was what engendered, pioneering to the West Coast ultimately back then. It was a certain energy that got catalyzed and constellated to move west, young man, like that, and the cowboy mentality. And of course there are strengths to it, true, and there are also weaknesses. But so I think that it underscores, underlies some of the ethos of our culture, and so people don't like to think of themselves as having needs, because that translates by, not in reality, but by connotation with being needy. I was saying that about myself earlier, just playing around a little bit. But you know what I mean? So to claim needs, which you were both making it utterly clear that we all have, and it's actually a sign of life, it's an impulse toward life. I wholly agree with that. At the same time, it's in a context in which having needs is considered almost a bad thing.
And
maybe
that's
we'll talk to that.
Why we're redefining it. We are absolutely saying the old idea of needs. I mean, think of all the things that I love what you're saying here. It's like, what does it mean when you have needs? It means that you're weak. Yeah. It means that you're self-centered. It means you're dependent. All these
selfish.
Things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if I said, hey, I got this friend of mine, he's just so needy. Who's going to want to say, is somebody going to go, oh, great, I want to meet this guy.
Yeah, right. Can I meet him?
Yeah,
right.
Just that we've been given, and we were born into, all kind of like a zeitgeist in here of an attitude about needs. And this idea of turning them into life instead of weakness, just imagine that. Just, think of that.
Exactly, so that magical transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, them as life. They're a way for us to wrap our head around life. And it's what I love about it is non-sectarian. It's just, if you're a human, you qualify. We can do this.
Yes, right. It's not dependent on color, gender, or anything. Just, do you breathe, and are you human?
Are you human? Yes. And by the way, what's very important is that any human, even humans who have done things that I consider just, I don't even want to think about. But yet, if we can't figure out a way to connect to people who are doing things that we find important, what are we going to do? We have to have a path. And so
that's for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folks, even in the military, who are screaming for this work because they know we can't bomb ourselves into victory anymore. And so the only way we're going to win, survive here, is to stop wanting to kill one another and not have that as some kind of a good idea. And I think Marshall gave us a way of thinking of other ideas that will accomplish way more than bombs ever could.
Yeah. Rick, I'm interested in hearing, because of the work you do with the We Campaign and We the World, and of course you've been on the show a number of times talking about 11 Days of Global Unity, and we always have such a wonderful array of people who are doing fantastic things in the world. You have a larger purview of the application also of this work. I'm wondering, how do you see that showing up, let's say, in more political or diplomatic context? Have you seen it actually deliberately used for discussion, for conflict resolution, mediation?
Oh, yes, totally. And actually, Thom has some stories about that too. And when when I used to go to Marshall's workshops, he would tell stories about how he would perform mediations in places like Rwanda, for example, where you have on one side of the table people whose family members had been killed by people sitting on the other side of the table. So it's an incredible situation. And at the end of a couple of days of work, they were able to have a very different kind of connection with each other than they had coming into it. But of course, Marshall would always be the first one to say that it isn't just doing this work, me being there and being the mediator. It would usually take months and months before they even got to the table. I mean, even agreed to sit at a table with each other. So the real work, or the majority of the work, happened before Marshall was even there. But it still is a very powerful tool. Framework, process, language, consciousness.
I'd like to bring up a possible example and hear both Thom and you, kind of deconstruct it perhaps. Let's say you have a couple, because as a therapist, I do couples counseling and coaching and family as well. And it's always interesting because sometimes there will be a situation in which one of the parties is more tuned in to responsible language and the other not. So one is sort of browbeating the other, being punitive and critical and insulting, and just not good ways of communicating at all. But it's happening rather instinctually, and it's just kind of flowing, kind of the way I was referring to before with children's primary process as an example. And the other one, through some coaching of mine and just themselves, I'm kind of painting a bit of a generic funny picture almost. It's not really funny, but says, yes, I understand how you feel. You sound, very disturbed by the way I, fill in the blank. And I'm feeling rather forlorn right now listening to you at this moment, and I would love to speak with you, let's even say on a more elevated level. Yeah, I bet you would. And, then litany continues. How do you deal with a situation where the difference between the parties is so large? Thom, maybe first you'll start.
Yeah, I can take this one. Sure, I've done plenty.
I'm sure you encounter this a lot.
Sure. That is an old pattern that they brought with them, right?
Exactly.
And so, for me, first of all, I want to really, really be clear. Do they really want to resolve their problems here? Or do they really, really want? And so if the answer is yes, then my next question is going to be, okay, so then let's do something different here. And one of the things is, are you willing to not speak for the other person or characterize the other person?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the answer is yes, okay, good, now we're moving. Because without these yeses, we're referees. We're not really helping. And so the next yes I'm going to ask for is, if we can figure out a way to solve this, no matter what it is, will you accept it provided it meets your needs? So these are the 3 points, right, that give us the ability to move in. So though that's the rules. If we're not going to play that game, then it's going to be I'm sure you've seen it. What happens is it becomes quite chaotic. And
so that's your leverage, and it's your way of eliciting a level of interest and commitment, especially from them, that they're willing to abide by certain rules, and provided, as you said, that it meets their needs according to the list of needs. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the other part for me is, in any given moment, usually one of the two parties needs more empathy than the other. They need some help in expressing what's alive in them, and maybe even figuring out what it is. And so that's what I do as a mediator. I'm going to go to the person who's in the most pain, and I'm going to say, try to figure out, okay, let's figure out what's going on, and not what your judgments are. What are your needs? Is it that you want more trust? Is it that you want more harmony? Is it that you want more partnership? Let's really sit down and figure out, what are the things that we want, not what do we want people to do, not what's wrong with them. What do we want in our life? And so it's this kind of resetting and saying, okay, let us put the things on the table that we would love to have in our lives. And often people are like, oh, that's just like me. I love those things too. And so we start seeing each other on this universal level that Rick referred to later, which I thoroughly believe that if any human being on this planet, if you're a human, we have a lot in common, a lot. And we're not, it's hard for us to see it often, and when we're in pain, it's really hard to see it. And so that's where this work comes in, right? It gives us a path to start understanding ourselves as just like me, just like you, all just like one another.
Yeah, and then
you're starting to sound so much like me. I don't understand. Wait a minute. What's the difference between us?
Right.
Is there one? Well, you have the name Thom, and I have the name Mitchell, and you have the name Rick. Thank God. Yes. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Rick, yes.
Yeah, the final stage of such a mediation would be when you have, let's say, party A and party B, right? So party A is able to articulate their own needs that have been brought up in all of this, and they can also articulate party B's needs and feelings, of course, the whole package of feelings and needs. And then party B can do the same thing with themselves, their own feelings and needs, and party A's feelings and needs. And then what happens is we call that being in a state of connection. And when that happens, then the both parties are in a position to actually co-create a new strategy that could actually meet both of their needs.
Because we've given them new information they didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
Their own, each other's.
And even a method of using language that, that simply cultivates being responsible in speaking, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I get from having read Marshall's work and not having
really
been a formal practitioner, but reading.
Yeah.
Yes.
That he figured out if we use these words, we can develop a consciousness eventually. That these words corral, so to speak, our thinking process, and it's a guide as well. And if we really are striving for connection, we can follow these words. But ultimately, it's the thoughts, right? In other words, if I just say, "Oh well, I feel," I come home and my the sink's full of dishes. We all have dish problems in the world. So I come home and I could say, "Oh well, I'm feeling anxious when I observe that the dishes are piled to the bottom of the cabinet, and I really value order. So clean up the dishes, please." Is that NVC? Is that nonviolent communication? No, it's the same old communication hidden inside the right words.
Yes.
And
very important point. So how do you take that? Because there's an emotion, of course, that has that anger underneath it, right? So how do you work with that emotion that's strong? There's a lot of emotional charge there.
Sure.
How do you neutralize that so that the communication comes out without eliciting another emotional reaction?
Yeah, well, first of all, I am going to take responsibility for it. And one of the things that I learned in this work is that anger is this combination of three things. One is that I have an unmet need. Always I have an unmet need. The other thing, which is what makes it anger, is that I have a judgment about it. I have a should, shouldn't thought. I think somebody should or shouldn't be doing something, or something's right or something's wrong, and that's what adds the agitation. And then the third aspect of this is that I'm probably going to do something that'll guarantee that my need will not be met. And so when I'm angry, I know that I have an unmet need and a should, shouldn't thought, and I want to pay attention to that. Because the should, shouldn't thought is actually going to help me figure out what it is that I need. Like if I think somebody's being lazy, let's say, what might I need? And I can ask myself this. Instead of saying, "Hey, you're being lazy," I can say, I'm thinking they're lazy. What is that? I'm getting agitated. I'm getting angry. And then I could say, well, I guess I think they should be doing something, but what is it that I really want? I want more partnership. I want more mutuality. And so when I do this, right, I can now have a conversation. I'm not saying we can do this instantly, but here's the process, right? I can notice I'm angry, figure out what that need is underneath, and change the conversation to not who's wrong, but to what would I love in this relationship. So now instead of saying, "You know what, you're being really lazy," I can say, could we talk? Are you interested in talking about how we could have more collaboration and maybe
more
even
mutuality?
more Yeah, exactly. And so that is a very different conversation than lazy.
Very different, exactly. So when you both work with people, are you teaching them kind of step by step to, because there is, like I was saying, there is an emotional charge, whether it's in the direction of anger, or it could be more than anger, it could be super anger like rage, it could be even feelings of disappointment have a lot of charge, Anyway, on it goes. There's a whole list of different, flavors, if you will, of emotion, tones. Do you then teach people to have that moment of reflection wherein they will take a look and say, this sounds like there's a need unmet in me. Before I open my mouth again, let me take a look at that. And then seek to engage my friend or my partner or whoever.
That's wonderful. That's perfect practicing, But the before we can do that, we can borrow, like as a trainer or as a mediator, we can loan consciousness. Marshall was very good at that. In other words, somebody's getting angry.
Yes.
All I have to do is say, "Wow, I can really hear that." I mean, that's just got to be really frustrating. I can only imagine you're really frustrated. Yeah, I'm really frustrated.
As you were saying before. Yeah.
Yeah, and then say, yeah, and I'm you know, and yeah, I've been frustrated for years. Yeah, so you know, and so it's not just that it's frustrating; it just seems that it has no end. You're exhausted from this. Yes, exactly. And so we just help that person get in touch with themselves, really, and then we'll turn to the other person and help them. And so I'm literally just simply giving two people empathy in front of one another. Yes. And when I do that, it can be pretty magical. I've gone many times from people not being able to make eye contact. And what I love working in child custody because it's just so important. But I've had couples go from no eye contact, could barely make eye contact, to with enough empathy, they can start to look at one another, and then they can start to name their own needs. And then, as Rick was saying earlier, they can actually start to name and even connect to and relate to the needs that the other person has.
Beautiful, beautiful. Rick, in the scenario that I painted, how would you respond?
Yeah. Well,
Sorry?
I was also thinking about what you both were talking about with where one person, and like Thom was saying, you know, people can notice in their lives if they're angry at something, then what's going on? They can just see that flag coming up, right? That has those characteristics, right? An unmet need and a judgment, et cetera, et cetera. So what I have found, like doing some of the workshops, the 10-week workshops that the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication offers, called practice groups, what I remember seeing sometimes in those situations is that a person, let's say they had a blow-up with someone, they were angry and they screamed at them or whatever, then a few days later they started thinking about these things, you know, and they put two and two together after the fact, right? So what we would encourage people to do is kind of become aware of that those flags coming up earlier and earlier. Okay, so then maybe the next time it would be like an hour after the blow up. Then they say, "Oh my God, that's what happened. I was angry. I had an unmet need and a judgment." And then then it becomes, as they get more aware and more practice, then they realize it just as it's happening, right? Just at that moment, and then they can kind of recover and maybe say something to the other person about their realization. And then it could be before, a person knows that they're going to be meeting with someone, and there is a possibility that there could be a conflict that comes up. So even before it happens, then they have in this mind, okay, let's see.
Preventative medicine, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah. So you just like roll it back until it becomes prevention instead of after the fact. After the fact.
Beautiful.
Regret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those who are not superhuman, we actually learn to not say anything. Like, Rick was talking about that hour. One of the things we train really early on is to, like, what do you say when you're angry? Nothing.
Yeah, right.
And we learn that, but the thing is, remember, how we were all told, well, when you're angry, count to 10. But no, so I just got angry 10 seconds later. What I can do is, I'm like, if I take that 10, I have something to do during that 10 seconds. I can ask myself, what is that? What is driving me nuts? And those are my little cue words. I say, what is that?
Sure.
And then that.
I'm going to just add this to that, if I may, as a kind of long-time therapist, I make a clear distinction for people with their emotions, and anger seems so close to the chest, no pun intended. It's so virulent, if you will, that I make a distinction for folks that they are feeling the anger. They are not angry. And that creates a little bit of distance, because otherwise, if you think about it, I am angry. I mean, that's sort of like a definition of self. Well, nobody wants to define themselves as angry, right, exactly. But if you say, I feel anger, and I recognize that feelings come and go, sometimes in a moment. They wash over us all like waves in an ocean. And, oh, my God, I'm thinking, Rick, of what you were saying before, of detecting it early detection, so to speak. Oh, my God, here it comes. So there is this objectification of the emotion. Now, there's only so far that we humans can go with that. But even a little bit can be useful. I think you both agree. Right.
Chime in.
Please.
If you're speaking of early detection, what we can do is perhaps, how people buy, like a little baby tiger, and then one day they come home and it ate their couch and their dog, right? So what we can do with our feelings can be very similar. That, we might be able to notice them. Or the fact is, the earlier we can notice them, and that's part of the work. We were talking about needs before, and our attitude toward that. Well, our attitude towards feelings isn't exactly a connected one, and so feelings have a bad reputation too. And so, what Marshall taught us is, well, wow, we have radar. I mean, if you think of feelings as just radar, it's incredibly helpful.
Yes,
and
nice.
The more I listen, the more I hear. And that's been a big change for me. I call it my feelings muscle. It will actually increase. And so what'll happen is I can notice feelings that I almost couldn't notice before, like the little annoyance, or sometimes feelings that have been there for years. And so it's very powerful. Part of the work as well. So I just
very much. I understand that. Well, this is beautiful work. I mean, I feel it's so speaking to a world of violence that we find ourselves in, and I believe myself, wholly unnecessarily, frankly, odd as that may seem in a violent world, but indeed, I think it's a secondary way of being that is, well, I feel that what Marshall has offered us as well have others, a way through, a point of leverage for really facilitating healthy communication between people by ownership of language and speaking in a way that's creative and constructive instead of sort of automatic and unconscious and oftentimes destructive. I'd love to hear, before we close, enjoying this so much, a story or two from each of you of your seeing nonviolent communication. You gave us an example a bit, Thom, of being in a child custody context. Are there any sort of real-world stories that you might share with our audience that would be illustrative for us to know?
For Rick or for me, Thom? Yeah.
Well, both of you, actually.
Yeah.
Each of you.
Well, I could go first. I mean,
please.
This is kind of a little bit personal, but beautiful.
Sure.
As it turns out, I met the love of my life during the workshop that Thom and I were co-facilitating. It was a nonviolent communication 9-week workshop, and I was assisting Thom. And and I met one of the students there, and it turned out that the experience of going through the workshop together has become like a foundation, like a base, from which we realize that we can actually get through conflicts that inevitably arise, as they do with every couple. And we are able to utilize some of the processes that NVC provides, and we're very clear. And we go through it. We talk about our feelings and our needs and what the strategies are that aren't working for whatever the situation is, and it really makes a big difference in our lives. And it's I'm happy to say we're going on to I think it's our 9th year of being together.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, beautiful. That is a real living example of what I was asking for. I love it. Yeah,
there you go.
That's great. Thank you. Thom, is there anything that may personal or otherwise? It's okay. It's nice to have living examples.
Parents, do I talk about my kids? Do I talk about organizations? Do I talk about mediation? You know, let's see. I'm all over the place. You got a favorite category?
Well, you know, that was a very personal one that Rick shared, which is beautiful. How about on an organizational level? What have you seen show up there?
Yes. I took on a mediation, I guess it was about 7 years ago, something like that, somewhere in there, which nobody seemed to want to take on. And the problem was there were 21 parties. And so basically there was a pretty large...
That's a lot of needs.
Yeah, exactly.
21 times 100.
A pretty well-known church, which will remain unknown right now.
Yes.
And they had a lot of real estate, and they were trying to figure out what to do with it, and they were just completely at odds. And so I agreed to do a mediation, and it was 21 different people came with 21 business plans in their hands. And so the first thing we did was we had a little ceremony where we decided that we were not going to even think about the business plans. And so we had not a real burning of the business plans, but something like that. And then what I did for 3 days after that was basically taught them how to see their own feelings and needs and then see other people's feelings and needs. And then we started this process of kind of moving away from what do I want to do? You know, everybody had this wonderful business plan to what is it that I love? What is it that what is it that's underneath what I want to do? And to be able to articulate that. And we kept going until every single person could look at every other person in that room and articulate. It was quite a memory job, right?
Yeah.
But they were able to do it because it became personal. It wasn't just I have to memorize these 5 words with this person. I actually started to understand where they were coming from on a deep level. And mostly everybody wanted the same thing. They just had different ideas about how to do it. And they ultimately realized that the real problem was their ability to work together and communicate and act as a unit. And that's what came out of it. A decision to take it all the way down to the roots again and then start again. And it worked beautifully, I might add.
How long did it take?
To execute the plan took 2 years, but the mediation...
But to go through the process that you led them through of
3 days.
Becoming so familiar. 3 days. Okay.
3 days.
Okay.
And we went into, it was really a riot because we went into, I mean, here we are, we had basically, 24 hours. So at 23 and a half hours, that's when we decided to go into strategy mode. Only then. And that's when they decided because, in other words, it was what Rick was talking about before. When everybody can see everybody's needs, then we can start thinking about what we want to do, right? When we know what the needs are. But what was interesting, the strategies weren't about turning, a camp into an RV park or a church into this or that or some other thing. What they realized was. And for me, this was the beautiful part. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with them being able to work together. And so the unmet need was actually collaboration and trust. And so those are, and if they never made it to the table, those needs, which they don't when we talk about strategies often, you wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Which is much more of a mental execution thing rather than a feeling need thing.
And it's terribly personal by comparison, right? So
it
brought them in, and then it took about 2 years for them to sort out to learn to work together, and then sort out what to do with all their real estate. Actually,
wow, great. So they sold off the Vatican too? No, I'm kidding you.
They're renting it. It's Airbnb now. Did you hear?
That's good. I appreciate the work that the two of you are doing very much, on so many levels. I just, for fun's sake, I'll just share with you that I run workshops I've been doing for many years, bringing together Qigong, this ancient Chinese meditative exercise, which moves the energy through the body, so feelings don't get stuck anywhere, but get a sense of flow through the body and connected to earth and what we refer to as above heaven, and therapeutic theater, which is a name that I came up with after studying something called psychodrama way early in my professional life, and I just never liked that name, and changed it into something that I was much more fond of. I love theater, and I actually found that I love the kind of the therapeutic quality and gift of it. So a lot of that involves role-playing and standing in someone else's shoes and reversing roles and repeating what the last person said. And before you know it, you get windows opening and doors opening internally, and people are, just embracing because they go, oh, that's what you meant. Oh, my God, I really get it. And it's just so much fun. And the Qigong sort of is the engine that starts the movement inside and actually neutralizes some of the anger that people are carrying around and makes the situation, the context, very workable and more pliable, if you will. And I like to emphasize neuroplasticity and some of the other fun discoveries that we have these days in neuroscience that gives people, again, leverage over themselves. So they feel that they really are in control and they feel empowered to be able to shift positions without thinking it's the end of the world, and it creates that kind of space. And anyway, I just wanted to share those little bits with you because I thought both of you that you'd appreciate that quality of enhancing communication and empathy between people. So
Definitely.
That puts me in a position of just even more deeply appreciating the work of Marshall Rosenberg and what the two of you are doing. Thom, interesting, huh?
So, Mitchell, there are a couple of interesting things coming up. Do you want?
I know. I was just about to ask you and Thom. Thom, you have a compassion workshop coming up, and
the compassion
Rick,
course.
you are. Yeah. Thom, why don't we start with you, and then we'll say, why don't you share details so how people can learn about the course you're teaching and get in touch with you if they'd like, and then Rick, please do same.
Okay. So there's two things. Well, we have, as Rick referred to earlier, we have actually an open source practice group curriculum that people can use anywhere in the world. Also, if people want to try getting...
What does that mean? Anybody can kind of join in and in the NVC groups that take place in New York, or?
Well, if you want to form your own group, this will give you the curriculum. Now, we also
okay. Got it.
Right. We also have facilitators in New York, but we have we've got folks kind of all around the world, actually.
Yes.
We have practice groups in Austria. We've got them in Egypt, in Detroit, Florida, and New York.
Yes.
So that's one thing. But I think the thing that it's been the life changer for me really is called the Compassion Course, or the Compassion Course Online. And I started that. We're going into our 8th year now. I started it because I had just gone through a big process of learning nonviolent communication, and it was pretty darn expensive. And so what I wanted to do is just make it more accessible to people. Mm-hmm. And so I dedicated a year of my life to writing this course, a 1-year course, it was like 52 installments of a concept, a story that would illustrate that concept, so it shows it really works in real life, and then practices that we can do to develop that skill, right, or that concept in our lives. And so 52 of those every week, 52 for a year. And we started out with 550 folks in the course. And this year we have 6,000, and we're projected for close to 8,000. Since we started, it's been translated into 4 languages now. Next year it'll be 6 languages. Mm-hmm. And we're in 110 countries.
God, Thom. God bless.
And
beautiful. How will people, if they're interested, how would they get in touch with you?
If you just actually Google or just type compassioncourse.org. But if you just Google Compassion Course, it's right there. And my organization in New York, we're nycnvc.org. But again, if you just Google Nonviolent Communication New York, all that stuff shows up. And
great.
Yeah, and also if you Google my name, THOMBOND, that'll also
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah. So the course
Thank
is
you
the
so much for
registration's
that.
open.
Yep.
It closes in a couple of weeks, and then away we go for the year.
Okay.
And so we close 1 year. We're closing down 17, 18, and we're going to start 18, 19 on the 20th, actually, of this month.
Okay, of June. Oh, so this is timely.
It is.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And Rick, you have an event that I am helping to promote also, coming up with some of our favorite friends and colleagues. Why don't you tell us?
Sure, and I just want to also mention that We the World is supporting and promoting the Compassion Course that Thom was just talking about. And it really is wonderful. Thom didn't mention, but every month they also have a gathering, an online gathering, so people can actually interact a bit and ask questions. Right, Thom?
Yeah. And
Beautiful.
we have a Facebook page, and we have a bulletin, an e-board that's not Facebook for those people who don't like that.
Yes.
So, in other words, it's a 24/7 community, really, for a year, if you want it to be. And if you don't want it to be, it can be a very private. I mean, ultimately, we all learn this one at a time. It's a very personal thing. And so that's kind of the nature of the course. It's just kind of the two of us.
Right. All two of us with 8,000 next to us.
Exactly.
Rick, please tell us about Jude Caravan and the group, the event.
All of that. And so just one last thing on the Compassion Course. It's starting on June 20th. And 2 days before that, we're doing a special event that was actually not my idea for the event. It was our friend Jude Caravan, and we'll talk about her in a minute. But she has become very interested in nonviolent communication, and so we decided to put together an event that actually speaks to her work and how nonviolent communication is kind of an application, in a sense, of the work of unity consciousness that she is doing. So all the universal values that we were talking about, all these needs that we all share.
Jude has been on the show, both radio and TV, so my audience does know her.
Your audience knows her.
Familiar.
So, so it's Jude Caravan. She's a former physicist, and she is
cosmologist.
Yes, she created. She wrote the book, The Cosmic Hologram, and her whole thing is the whole world view. So we're doing an event called The Emergent Whole World View and the Power of Nonviolent Communication. And so she and I are like the main speakers, but there are other featured speakers as well. That's Kurt Johnson, Dr. Kurt Johnson, Kristen Hoffman, who's a performer, so she's going to be singing some beautiful songs. She's an amazing singer. Gil Agnew, who works with Jude Caravan, and then Robert Levine. And this is taking place in New York City at the Integral Yoga Institute on 227 West 13th Street, and it's the evening of Monday, June 18th, starting at 7 p.m. And I guess if you want more info about that and about the Compassion course, you can go to we.net. So it's very exciting.
It's so hard to remember.
Great, Rick. Thank you both for being on today. And with this wonderful roundtable, I think people are feeling nonviolent already. I do. I can kind of feel it through the airwaves. So it's been successful and effective. Thank you both for the good work that you're doing, and I'm glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Great. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, you, as offered a roundtable on nonviolent communication, and you got a real kind of sense of the contours of it. It's obviously a large subject. I mean, if Thom is teaching a year course, and both of them have been studying for a long time, and I'm familiar, I actually, through Thom, interviewed Marshall Rosenberg, who passed some time ago. I interviewed him back in 2004, actually, for A Better World TV, and it was a very special moment because I had a chance to spend the day with him in one of the classes and get a feel for it. And I had been familiar with it, but there's nothing like getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and that was really a blessing. And also to have these two be so active in this community and running this community, really, in the New York area. So that, too, remains an ongoing blessing for us all to learn. I mean, becoming observant of the way we speak, the patterns we use, the attitudes with which we speak, the tonality, the emotion behind all of that, really, in many ways, it really kind of determines the quality of our lives, because our relationships with ourselves, of course, and with others, and with the universe itself, all are really the things that increase the value and beauty and preciousness of our lives. It's all happening in the space of relationship. And speaking is something so intimate. And when we are responsible in our speaking, and as Thom well put it, that means also our thinking, then we are becoming enlivened on another level. We're becoming elevated on another level. And Well, there's no price to pay for that, because that has to do with the very exquisiteness and sacredness of our lives. So I'm very grateful for both of them for being on the show today and contributing their respective experience and understanding to us. So I want to let you all know that I will be teaching up in the Catskills this coming weekend at the Shivananda Yoga Ranch, a very beautiful place perched up on a mountain in the Catskills. And I'll be teaching what I was just talking about, Qigong and therapeutic theater, to the public at large that show up there, as well as to the new and budding yoga teachers that are finishing the TTC course there. So that's very exciting, and everyone is welcome. Just go get in touch with the Shivananda Yoga Center in the Catskills in Woodburn, and you can just Google that. And I'll be teaching again at Shivananda in the Bahamas on Paradise Island the weekend of July 6th through 8th. So truly another beautiful place to experience this kind of work, and nonviolent communication is threaded through the work I do. So I truly invite you all to join me there as well. And there's always the every other week salon here in New York City, the Tao of Relationship, I call it, a Better World, Heaven on Earth Salon, and that's always fun, and all of that information is always on the website, www.abetterworld.tv. If you are interested in any of that, or you want to simply communicate directly with me, which I so appreciate you are doing, go to mjr@abetterworld.net, mjr@abetterworld.net. If you want counseling and coaching services, biofeedback, lectures, workshops in your area, go to abetterworld.tv and mitchellrabin.com, but mainly write to me at that address, mjr@abetterworld.net. We are a 501c3, so we always appreciate your participation with donations, contributions, investment, really, in creating a better world and keeping us surviving, sustaining, and thriving on the air. So remember, you can also watch our TV show online if you are anywhere in the world when it airs on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that is New York time, by clicking on the upper right-hand corner where it says click to watch, and then click again when you get in. So thank you again. I want to thank Thom Bond and Rick Ulfik for being guests on the show today. And this is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers! Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Requires new line. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 480p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers! Burgers. Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Requires new line. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 480p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
I could only afford used winter tires this year. Broker's Lamina at 1-800-NEW-CREDIT made the difference between a slippery slope and a firm grip on the road.
Will took the pressure off his tire purchase with a loan from Broker's Lamina at 1-800-NEW-CREDIT. It's easy to apply over the phone or online at lamina.ca. Get approved instantly up to $1,000 with no documents or credit checks and pay back over 3 to 5 months. Spice up your drive and call 1-800-NEW-CREDIT or apply online at lamina.ca.